The face of breast cancer is indeed changing. No longer is it your grandmother's disease. It is your wife's, girlfriends, mothers, sisters, and daughters. There are more than 250,000 women 40 and under in the U.S. living with breast cancer. This year alone, more than 11,000 young women will be told they have breast cancer, and 1,100 of them will die. Younger women generally do not consider themselves to be at risk for breast cancer. Only 5% of all breast cancer cases occur in women under 40. However, breast cancer can strike at any age. The youngest reported case is 14. When a young woman is diagnosed with breast cancer, it can be tougher to handle than for an older woman because they face different issues. From the medical side, breast cancer in younger women is typically more aggressive. Then there's a possibility of infertility, conflicting medical advice and treatments, genetic risk and future risk. There's issues of body image, self-esteem, sexuality, and relationships. On top of that, young women with breast cancer often feel isolated and have little contact with women their own age who can relate to what they are experiencing. To support one another, more and more young breast cancer survivors are bonding together and sharing their own stories, encouraging one another and inspiring other women to become advocates for their own health. In the next half hour, we're going to talk to some leading breast cancer experts about how they're treating young women with this disease. And you're going to meet some brave young breast cancer survivors living right here in our community. I'd like to introduce you to Melanie and Kim. They are sisters, and as you'll find out, their bond runs deeper than blood.
Cereal options or breakfast casserole this morning.
34-year-old Melanie Kennedy has always been close to her sister Kimberly, but an autumn day last October brought them even closer.
My daughter and I were in Fort Smith at a volleyball tournament, and we were in the parking lot having a conversation, and I'd backed up and there was a pole behind me, and I didn't realize it, and I turned around and just smacked right into it and smashed my left breast. The next day I got out of the shower feeling around to see if there was any soreness or lumps, just anything at all, not lumps really, but just soreness or bruising, and found a lump. My husband said, "You better go get it checked out, especially if it's not sore."
Following her husband's advice, Melanie scheduled a mammogram.
We actually physically magnify this with the machine, but then we can manipulate the images and magnify. We can zoom up on it.
Dr. Dana Greer, a radiologist at the breast center in Fayetteville, administered a digital mammogram on Melanie. Doctors say digital mammograms are better than film mammography for younger women who have denser breasts. The digital images make it easier to view results.
These are the standard views that are always taken with a mammogram. This is of her left breast from the top, and this is her right breast. And you can see kind of the white smudgy stuff is just normal breast tissue, but this is the area of abnormality, and she's marked what she feels with that little BB right here. You can see that little BB. So when we did our mammograms, we saw an obvious area of abnormality. We can zoom up on it and really get a good look at it. We can measure it. This area that we're looking at measures about 2 centimeters, so a little bit less than an inch, about 3/4 of an inch. And in this case, this was worrisome.
Is this a typical type of cancer that you would normally see, a tumor that you would see?
Hers is. A spiculated mass, so a mass, a dense area, white on the mammogram with this spiculated margin is the most typical appearance of breast cancer. When you see that, we're just almost certain. We tell patients we really can't tell for sure until we do a needle biopsy, but we're almost certain in one that looks like this. This is absolutely typical. Some cancers just fool us, either we can't see them very well on the mammogram, or on the mammogram they look very smooth and we think they're going to be some kind of a benign process and they turn out to be a cancer, but this is a typical one. She's just right out of a textbook.
Melanie got the news quickly.
They did go over the results immediately with me, and she said, "I do not like what I see. I feel like it's highly likely it's cancerous, and we need to get you biopsied."
Melanie's biopsy was performed that same day by Dr. Michael Cross, a surgical oncologist in Fayetteville. That weekend, he phoned Melanie with the results.
It was a very surreal experience. It was very emotional, but it was a normal day in our lives. We were going to a football game for my son. He plays Pee Wee football, and I knew I would be hearing from Dr. Cross over the weekend. He said he'd be traveling, but he would be sure to get back with me as soon as he could. And so I look down, and there's a number I don't recognize, and just scared to death to answer it. And, he said the words, "It is cancerous." You get off the phone, you don't know what to say. Your family's in the back seat, your kids are in the back seat, your husband's sitting beside you, and everybody's like, "Who was that? What'd they say? Who was that?" And so you just have to tell them. We just talked about it right there in the car driving to a Pee Wee football game. You just try to hold yourself together to be strong for your kids and break down here. So we have to process that and get ourselves together and go out and play football. I was sitting on the sideline saying, "Go Alex," knowing all this, you're processing the fear inside and different things that you have to go through.
It is an emotional experience to learn you have breast cancer, and understanding the disease can be difficult too. So what exactly is breast cancer? It is a malignant tumor in the breast created by a group of cancer cells that multiply. Those cells may invade surrounding tissues or spread to other areas of the body. We don't know what causes breast cancer, but we do know that all women are at risk. Researchers feel that certain factors may increase a woman's chance of getting breast cancer: age and family history, genetics, or previous benign breast biopsies. The early onset of menstruation could factor in, or a high-fat diet. Not having children may put a woman at higher risk, or having children later in life. But here's the puzzling part. 80% of women who develop breast cancer have no known risk factors. With risk factors being vague at best, early detection through technology is extremely important.
She's a young woman, aged 34.
Dr. Stephen Harms, a national expert in breast MRI, explains Melanie's MRI results.
This is a projection image where you see the vessels in the skin. This is the right breast. Here's the left breast, and you can see in the left breast there's a mass that is lighting up with contrast. Now, what happens on MRI is we don't see tumors the same way that we see them with mammography. The reason a tumor is seen on MRI is because tumors typically have abnormal capillaries, and those poorly formed capillaries leak this small gadolinium molecule out of the capillaries and allows us to see the tumor before we see the background tissue. And here you can see the tumor right here. Let me blow that up. You see this kind of a ring-enhancing lesion with a central area of low signal. That is a typical appearance of a highly malignant breast cancer.
Good job.
No one in Melanie's family had ever had breast cancer, but with Melanie being diagnosed so young, doctors agreed that she should be tested for the breast cancer gene. Melanie took the genetic blood test, and it came back positive.
I have a personal friend who has the gene.
Sarah Fatak, a genetic risk assessment nurse, counsels patients who find out they have the gene mutation. Melanie's case was unusual.
To Melanie's knowledge, there was not breast cancer in the family. And that is a very interesting case. I don't have a lot of detail on her family, on how many aunts that she may have, and mothers and sisters, her mothers and grandmothers, sisters, and that sort of thing. But it makes me wonder if perhaps this may have come down from a family that did not have a lot of women, if maybe it came down from her father's side of the family, or in some way that would make it easier for the gene to hide. So it may be that they have the gene, but it simply doesn't express itself in a man. That's how these genes can hide in a family, and then when the girl is born who happened to have gotten the gene, it is much more likely to express in her. Women who have the gene have up to an 87% chance of developing breast cancer over their lifetime. If someone in your family has had breast cancer and they were diagnosed with cancer under the age of 50, that's an indicator that you may need to be tested. The other indicators are ovarian cancer in the family, or a man with breast cancer, Ashkenazi Jewish history, and those are the major things that we would look at to see whether or not this is a person that should be tested.
Obviously, for a young woman to find out that she has a genetic mutation, that she could face breast cancer again in her life if she hasn't had it already, how hard is that emotionally to handle, especially as a young woman?
I think there's a lot that goes into that. There are a lot of medical decisions that you need to be thinking about. There's, of course, your family. If that young woman has not had children yet, there's the decision whether or not to have children. Of course, there's not, because of the advances that we've made and the preventive measures that we have, there certainly wouldn't be encouraged not to have children. And then, of course, there's just the scare, the fear that, wow, that was a close call. I've got to really take charge of my life and do the best I can to get myself through this.
Melanie found out she had the gene after having a lumpectomy, a surgery where only her tumor and the skin surrounding it is removed from the breast. Thankfully, the cancer had not spread to her lymph nodes, but Melanie would still undergo chemotherapy. After learning of her sister's diagnosis, 36-year-old Kimberly decided to check on her own health and scheduled a mammogram.
He called me back in his office, and he was very compassionate and knew about Melanie and just said, "Kim, there is a spot on there." And I was just like, "You've got to be kidding me." I just couldn't believe it. They found a calcification, but actually that's what flagged the mammogram. My tumor was under that, and it was only, it was cancerous.
Like her sister, Kimberly chose to have a lumpectomy. But during the surgery, her doctor discovered the cancer had spread to one of her lymph nodes.
From then, my surgeons were very aggressive and suggested that I have a double mastectomy. So I agreed to do that, and they did my surgery first with the reconstruction, and I'm currently going through chemo. As far as the double mastectomy, I mean, it's just, I didn't really have a choice because the density of my breast, and every surgeon that I talked to, and that's a big decision, but they said that I would have to get MRIs every 6 months, and it's just not feasible to do that. I didn't have a problem with it. As young as we are, we can have the reconstruction, and I would rather, not have to worry about cutting my risk.
This one you could feel. This one.
Dr. Michael Cross says making a surgical decision about your breasts is never easy.
I don't like recommending mastectomies if you're, 34. But sometimes, we end up they have to have that peace of mind. So the younger you are, a lot of women tend to want both breasts removed and reconstructed, just so they don't have to deal with it coming back again.
What is your advice when it does come down to a woman deciding on what kind of surgery she's going to have? What plays into that decision of getting a lumpectomy versus a mastectomy?
Tumor size is the big, and if you have a lot of, we look under your arm and you have enlarged lymph nodes and things, we tend to probably want to do more mastectomies for more aggressive cancers.
Now, by getting a mastectomy done, are you completely eradicating any chance of reoccurrence? Can it still come back?
Yeah, it can, and unfortunately, you can't ever say once you've done surgery and chemo that you're absolutely 100% out of the woods. You have done everything to lower your risk of it coming back, to minimize it. But 30% of women are going to have, of all breast cancers, not little, little and large, are going to have trouble with recurrences. And the closer it is to the surgery that you've had a recurrence, the harder, the more difficult the prognosis. But if you're out 10 years and you've got a recurrence, you tend to do pretty well.
What is the difference, about breast cancer in young women, and especially as they face it emotionally, mentally, compared to an older woman who was diagnosed with breast cancer?
It's a great question. It's really hard to be young, to be in your 20s, have breast cancer, and you're thinking about a family. You're thinking about, I've got 60 more years of living. Where is it going to show up? Is it once you've had it, or you're done forever? And then the signs of coming back are very subtle. Most of the time you're going to live just fine, but sometimes you got to worry about the opposite breast, and every new lump you feel, every pain you feel, you become really heightened and worried, and that stresses you out. And so you may be in the doctor's office a whole lot more until you have some time to get comfortable and saying, I'm okay, I'm okay. And that literally takes 5, 6, 7 years to get through that.
Dr. Cross's words sounded all too familiar to me. Like Melanie and Kimberly, I was diagnosed with breast cancer at a very young age. I was 28. It was the fall of 2004, and I wasn't doing a self-breast exam. I happened to just come upon a lump in my breast, and I was just really surprised. So I decided, you know, I need to get this checked out, should definitely look into this. So called my doctor, made an appointment, and they ended up doing an ultrasound and decided that, you know what, we should do a biopsy just to be safe and make sure that this is nothing to be worried about. I went ahead and had the biopsy, and the results came back positive for breast cancer. It turned out to be stage 1, which is definitely a good thing. It was only 0.8 centimeters, so it wasn't as alarming to find that out. But of course, still to hear the words, you have cancer at 28 years old, that's pretty scary. So the doctor that I was seeing was very much into breast conservation, and he suggested that since it was stage 1 and it was so small and it had not spread to the lymph nodes, he suggested that I get a lumpectomy and go that route with the radiation. So I went ahead and did that. I didn't have to go through the chemotherapy. And by the spring, I was, you know, thinking back to the fact that my grandmother had had breast cancer on my father's side, and she had had it twice. She ended up dying in her 40s, which is very young, especially this was back in the 1960s. So once I had, you know, been thinking about my grandmother and her breast cancer, I was advised to maybe look at genetic counseling and get the test done to find out if I had the breast cancer gene. So I went and got that genetic test done and found out that I did have the breast cancer gene. Talking openly about breast cancer is not uncommon these days, but it wasn't always like that. Coming up, we'll take a look at one of the first women to come out and speak publicly about the disease.
It only takes minutes to have your breasts checked, yet millions of women think they're not at risk. And so the danger grows. Early detection is critical. To learn more, visit Komen.org.
Good evening. The pathology report on First Lady Betty Ford revealed today that there were microscopic traces of cancer cells in 2 of the 30 lymph nodes that were removed during Saturday's breast surgery.
In 1974, First Lady Betty Ford shocked the nation. She spoke openly about her battle with breast cancer.
Everybody has just been terrific. They've been great. And now I'm going home to my family, which I've been looking forward to so much. And thank you all for being here.
Mrs. Ford was one of the first high-profile American women to bring breast cancer to the forefront and into people's homes. The former First Lady ended up having a mastectomy. Today, at the age of 90, she is living cancer-free.
I never thought I would be a cover girl. You know, it was not my ambition.
Another woman who was fearless about her battle with breast cancer was 40-year-old Dina Metzger, a writer and poet. This photo was taken in 1978 after a mastectomy took her right breast. Metzger did not choose to have reconstructive surgery and instead covered her scar with a tattoo.
Well, I thought about it a long time. I wanted a tree for the tree of life. And that image meant that someone could look at my chest and not have to look away. It's no surprise that a woman would be struck down in that place where she is most woman. And perhaps the words that come to me feel very strong, but I'm going to say the most despised.
It was a bold move by Metzger and the thousands of women who have followed in her footsteps. Of course, no one ever wants to lose their breasts in the first place. As women, especially American women, our breasts represent femininity. On top of that, we live in a breast-obsessed society. The breast has been eroticized throughout the centuries. From famous Renaissance paintings to the pinup girls of the 1940s and 50s.
Those are daring. They're not much. I must confess. But
Today, you're encouraged to look beyond chicken breasts at Hooters. Then there's the sexy lingerie ads on television and billboards featuring women with ample cleavage. But you won't see too many of these billboards. These are not the images the world wants to see associated with breasts. But for thousands of women who choose not to have breast reconstruction after cancer, this is reality. The majority of women do choose reconstructive surgery. It's a way to feel put back together physically, and it seems to help women emotionally as well. But the side effects of treatments like chemotherapy can still wage a war on all that is feminine.
As a woman, you do feel ripped off of your femininity. Chemo puts you in menopause, so your hormones are messed up. So, you find strength in that by knowing that that's not all that matters. You find strength in knowing that you cherish life now after a cancer diagnosis, but you also don't want to feel like you're not a woman anymore and look at your spouse and think, how can you love me still? Because you have to deal with those kind of things. And so it's a very vulnerable place to be in because you're just like, here I am and I hope you love me anyway. And fortunately, we've had wonderful husbands that have stuck by us and have loved us anyway.
That's what was so amazing is when we were like, Mel and I were just totally in shock about having to do our hair and losing our hair, and both our husbands were like, it's no big deal. And we're like,
yes,
we're the
it
ones
is.
thinking it's a big deal, but they were like, we're fine. In fact, most Bobby and Jimmy both, they're like, why don't y'all just not even wear a wig? And we're, yeah, right,
Yeah.
Kimberly and Melanie have loving husbands, and now both couples savor the time they get to spend together each day.
And we have dealt with all the seriousness of it, and for probably, 3 months, cried and worried. And I think you just have to, once you get past that fact, you've got to lighten up and
embrace where you're at.
Even like the 2 weeks, I have 2 good weeks through my treatment, and just having a cup of coffee or being with Jimmy or whatever, you just enjoy each day. It has really opened my eyes about the little things in life you really enjoy versus worrying about if you have any hair. I mean, I could care less if I have hair. I just love being with him at night, watching a movie, stuff you take for granted.
Right.
It's just amazing how it opens your eyes because it just changes you.
Changes your perspective.
It does.
And we hope we don't lose that.
It is unusual for two sisters to battle cancer at the same time. Kimberly and Melanie see the shared experience as a blessing from God.
It was all about timing for both of us because even though you don't want cancer to happen to anyone in your family, if she hadn't found out when she did, my doctors had told me I wouldn't have, when I had my mammogram, it would have been so late, it would have been very, very bad. Anyway, so I feel like it's a positive that she found out. It's probably what saved both of us. I just honestly believe that there was a reason that it happened like it did, even the reverse order.
Yeah, we totally believe that God's timing in that poll for us was
what
a
saved
miracle.
us.
That was the miracle that He provided for us, and so we're very thankful for that random incident with a poll at a high school. So there was more to that planning than just randomness.
Since Melanie and Kimberly were diagnosed within a month of each other, they've been able to really help one another through their treatments.
It's been very, an awesome experience, if you can say that about a cancer diagnosis, just having one another, because we do have the support, and I can call her and say,
Right.
I feel so not feminine today. And she's like, girl, I understand. And I'm like, I have, you know, my eyebrows, my eyelashes, you know, there's all kinds of obstacles like that, but we can just run that off one another.
That's what's so neat too about, you have to look at it that way, is the surgery I've already been through. So I've been telling Melanie what she can expect. She had already gone through 3 treatments before I even had my first, so she was kind of telling me what to expect. Of course, our oncologists are like, y'all don't be talking too much to each other because you'll still be different. But we have honestly had each other to fall back on, and you can't share that experience. Not that we would want anyone to have to share it, but if we're going to have to go through it, at least we have each other to talk to about it.
That's what we were talking about earlier, the environmental was what
Dr. Cross feels confident that both women will fully recover from their cancer. When it comes to screening for the disease, Dr. Cross advises young women to start early with self-breast exams at age 18. He says it's important for a woman to be familiar with her breasts.
We tend to see a little bit more aggressive tumors in younger women because they go longer because they don't know what to look for. The signs aren't as obvious.
What are the warning signs? A lump in the breast, an abnormal thickening or change in density of the breast. Occasionally, breast cancer may be indicated by a lump under the arm, a redness of skin over the breast, a change of the nipple or discharge. High-risk women, such as those who have tested positive for the breast cancer gene, or those who have a mother or sister who have or have had breast cancer, should ask their doctors to begin annual mammograms 10 years prior to the age of diagnosis of the relative. As far as prevention goes, Dr. Cross believes healthy living may play a role in lowering a woman's risk of getting breast cancer.
The greatest things we can do in America is watch what we eat, exercise, drink as much water as you can. Those are healthy things that you can empower yourself and take control of your own body.
It can happen to anyone because I honestly thought, we exercise, we eat healthy. I've never had any problems at all. I've never even had a surgery. And we were just walking around like we were just the healthiest 2 girls in the world and had no clue, no clue. And it just does not discriminate against older women. That's my message for younger women, to just, make sure you go to your doctor and make sure you get all your checkups. And just watch yourself, because you don't have to be 40 years old. Obviously.